If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our mind-opening content. Also, if you find today's video insightful, smash that like button and share it with your friends. Trust me, this is one of those videos that can seriously change how you see yourself and the people around you. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to hold power effortlessly, commanding respect and influence wherever they go, while others, sometimes even smarter or more talented, struggle just to be heard? What if I told you the difference boils down to something surprisingly simple, but incredibly overlooked? It's about the emotions you show. Yep, the feelings you express, sometimes without even realizing it can either make you stronger or completely destroy your chances at success. Today, we're unpacking one of the most powerful and controversial minds in history, Niccolò Machiavelli. If you've ever heard the term Machiavellian and thought it meant just sneaky or ruthless, think again. Machiavelli was far more complex than that. He was a master observer of human nature and power dynamics. And in his writings, he warned leaders, politicians, kings, and everyday people about the three emotions they must never reveal openly if they want to stay on top. And here's the kicker. Most people, every single day, reveal these emotions without even thinking twice, sabotaging their own chances without realizing it. So what are these three emotions that Machiavelli said to keep locked inside? Fear, anger, and compassion. Sounds simple, right? But the way we handle or fail to handle these feelings defines everything from how people perceive us, how much control we hold in any situation, and even whether we achieve happiness or constant frustration. Imagine if you knew exactly when to show strength, when to hide fear, how to manage anger so it serves you instead of ruins you, and how to show compassion without losing respect. Imagine how different your life could be. We're going to dig into each of these emotions, why Machiavelli believed revealing them is dangerous, and how this ancient wisdom is more relevant than ever in today's hyper-connected, emotionally charged world. I'll also share real stories from history and modern life examples of people who mastered or destroyed themselves because of their emotional choices. Before we jump in, if you appreciate this kind of deep dive into psychology and philosophy, consider supporting the channel by clicking subscribe if you haven't already, hitting the like button below, and sharing this video with your circle. Also, if you want to support the channel further, check out the super thanks or donate buttons. Your support really helps keep the research and content coming. All right, get ready to rethink everything you thought you knew about emotions and power, because the truth about what you're feeling and what you're showing could change your life. In every era and in almost every culture, one truth about human nature remains constant. Emotions hold immense power over our decisions, relationships, and ultimately, our fate. Yet, the ability to master and strategically control one's emotions is a rare skill, one that has long been associated with strength and influence. It is not simply about suppressing feelings, but about understanding which emotions to reveal and which to conceal, and when. The wisdom behind this idea traces back centuries, most famously articulated by Niccolò Machiavelli, a Renaissance thinker whose insights into power dynamics continue to resonate deeply in the modern world. To grasp why controlling emotions is considered timeless power, it's important to recognize that emotions are more than private experiences. They're social signals. When we express feelings openly, especially intense ones, we are effectively communicating information about our inner state to those around us, friends, foes, colleagues, or strangers. This transparency can be a double-edged sword. Displaying confidence or calmness can inspire trust and respect, while showing vulnerability or agitation can invite challenge or manipulation. Human beings, consciously or not, react not just to facts but to emotional cues. This dynamic lies at the core of why mastering emotional expression is central to navigating social and political landscapes. Niccolò Machiavelli, born in Florence in 1469, lived in a tumultuous period of Italian history marked by fierce political rivalries, betrayals, and shifting allegiances. Unlike many of his contemporaries who idealized virtue and morality, Machiavelli approached power with stark realism. His seminal work, The Prince, breaks down the anatomy of leadership and power with an unflinching eye, focusing on practical outcomes rather than lofty ideals. His name has become synonymous with political cunning and pragmatism, often misunderstood as advocacy for deceit and cruelty. But beneath the controversy lies a sophisticated analysis of human nature and the mechanics of influence. Machiavelli's insights into emotions are especially profound. He understood that emotions are not merely personal experiences, but strategic tools or liabilities in the game of power. He warned leaders against revealing certain emotions openly because they signal weakness and invite exploitation. While some emotions can foster loyalty or inspire, others, when exposed, can become fatal flaws. For Machiavelli, controlling emotional expression is not about becoming cold or unfeeling, but about carefully managing the image one projects to maintain authority and respect. Among the emotions Machiavelli singled out as dangerous to reveal are three in particular: fear, anger, and compassion. Each, he argued, has the potential to undermine a leader's position if displayed openly and without restraint. This triad is striking because it challenges common assumptions about emotional honesty and leadership. Fear, often seen as a natural response to danger, is labeled a signal of weakness. Anger, though a powerful motivator, is a liability when it clouds judgment. Compassion, usually praised as a virtue, can be perceived as softness that invites betrayal. Fear, in Machiavelli's view, is perhaps the most insidious emotion to reveal. A leader who shows fear risks losing the confidence of followers and emboldening adversaries. Fear can be contagious. When a leader appears afraid, it quickly spreads doubt among their supporters. This dynamic is not confined to political arenas, but is equally evident in everyday situations from business negotiations to social interactions. Take, for instance, the iconic example of Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War. Lincoln faced enormous pressure and personal anguish, but his public demeanor was measured and resolute. By controlling visible signs of fear, he maintained the trust of the nation through its darkest hours. Contrast this with historical figures who displayed visible fear and subsequently lost influence or even their lives. Anger, the second dangerous emotion, is more complex. While anger can energize action and be justified in many situations, Machiavelli warned against allowing it to dominate or be openly expressed. An outburst of anger reveals unpredictability and a lack of control, which opponents can exploit. Historical leaders like Napoleon Bonaparte illustrate this perfectly. Napoleon's temper and impulsive wrath alienated key allies and contributed to strategic errors that ultimately led to his downfall. In modern times, business leaders who lose their temper risk damaging relationships and credibility. The destructive power of uncontrolled anger is apparent in countless personal and professional failures. Compassion, surprisingly, is the third emotion Machiavelli cautioned against revealing too openly. In Western culture, compassion is almost universally admired as a sign of moral strength and empathy. However, Machiavelli's perspective challenges this notion by emphasizing the strategic risks associated with appearing overly compassionate. Compassion can be misread as indecisiveness or weakness, encouraging rivals or subordinates to take advantage. The story of King Louis XVI of France is illustrative. His well-meaning, compassionate nature was seen as a liability by many courtiers and revolutionary forces alike, contributing to his inability to maintain control and ultimately to the fall of the monarchy. In a more contemporary example, business leaders who show excessive leniency may be undermined by employees or competitors. These three emotions, therefore, function as critical signals in the dance of power. Revealing them carelessly can tip the balance against you. Yet the challenge is not to become emotionally detached or unfeeling, but to cultivate emotional intelligence the skillful regulation and strategic display of emotions to achieve desired outcomes. Understanding Machiavelli's warnings is crucial in today's world because the dynamics of emotional perception have only intensified. Social media, constant connectivity, and a culture of emotional openness make it easy to reveal feelings impulsively, sometimes to damaging effect. Public figures, entrepreneurs, and everyday individuals alike struggle with when and how to show vulnerability. Machiavelli's advice offers a counterpoint, a reminder that emotional expression is a form of communication that must be managed carefully, especially the emotions of fear, anger, and compassion. Moreover, his insights encourage us to look beyond surface authenticity toward the deeper art of self-mastery and situational awareness. It is not about deception, but about strategic emotional clarity, knowing when to reveal strength, when to conceal weakness, and how to maintain the respect necessary to lead effectively. In conclusion, the power to control and strategically manage emotions has proven itself timeless because it is rooted in the fundamental nature of human social interaction. Niccolò Machiavelli, through his sharp observations and pragmatic philosophy, offers us enduring guidance. The three emotions he warned us never to reveal, fear, anger, and compassion, continue to challenge leaders in all walks of life. Mastering these is not about losing humanity, but about gaining the strategic wisdom that separates true power from mere impulse. Through examples ranging from Lincoln's calm resolve to Napoleon's fiery downfall and King Louis XVI's tragic compassion, we see how these lessons have played out on the grand stage of history and continue to shape our lives today. Fear is one of the most primal and powerful emotions a human being can experience. It is deeply rooted in our biology as a survival mechanism, designed to alert us to danger and prepare our bodies for fight or flight. However, when it comes to leadership and the exercise of power, fear is a double-edged sword. Niccolò Machiavelli, the Renaissance political philosopher, recognized fear's dangerous potential when it is openly revealed by those in positions of authority. He warned that displaying fear can undermine a leader's credibility, erode their followers' confidence, and invite adversaries to exploit that vulnerability. To understand why Machiavelli was so insistent on the concealment of fear, one must first appreciate the context in which he wrote. Machiavelli lived in a period of intense political instability in Italy, marked by frequent power struggles, betrayals, and wars. In such a volatile environment, the image a leader projected was often just as important, if not more so, than their actual power. Fear, when visible, suggested weakness, and weakness in a leader could be fatal. From Machiavelli's perspective, a leader who shows fear risks losing the trust and loyalty of their subjects or supporters. Fear is contagious. It signals to others that danger is imminent and that the leader might not be able to protect or guide them effectively. When people see fear in their leader, they may become anxious, lose confidence, and start seeking alternative figures to follow, figures who appear stronger or more certain. Furthermore, opponents and rivals often look for any sign of weakness to exploit. Fear serves as a red flag, inviting challenges, rebellion, and betrayal. Thus, Machiavelli argued that leaders should project strength and confidence even in the face of danger or uncertainty, because perception often shapes reality in politics and power dynamics. The philosophical underpinnings of this warning against showing fear can be traced to several schools of thought that emphasize self-control and the management of emotions. Stoicism, for example, a dominant philosophical tradition in the ancient world, teaches the importance of mastering one's emotions to maintain inner tranquility and effective judgment. The Stoics believe that external events are beyond our control, but our reactions to them are within our power. Fear, from a Stoic viewpoint, is a product of irrational judgments about the future in anticipation of harm that may or may not happen. Therefore, the ideal is not to eliminate fear entirely, which is nearly impossible given our biology, but to train ourselves to respond rationally and not be ruled by it. Modern psychology supports this idea, as well, emphasizing how fear can trigger a cascade of physiological responses that impair decision-making and social functioning. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates the fight or flight response, flooding the body with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. While useful in immediate danger, prolonged or inappropriate fear responses can lead to panic, paralysis, or irrational behavior. Leaders who visibly succumb to fear may make poor decisions or lose the composure that inspires confidence. Historical examples abound that illustrate Machiavelli's point. One of the most famous is Julius Caesar, a figure whose rise and fall is deeply entwined with perceptions of power and vulnerability. Caesar was a brilliant military commander and statesman who transformed the Roman Republic, but also engendered fear and jealousy among the Senate and political elites. Despite his outward displays of strength, some historians argue that Caesar occasionally showed signs of insecurity and fear, particularly regarding conspiracies against him. His failure to mask this vulnerability fully may have contributed to the ease with which his assassins plotted and executed his murder on the Ides of March. In the months leading up to his death, Caesar's inner circle and even the public caught whispers of his apprehension, which arguably emboldened his enemies. Another illustrative figure is Winston Churchill during World War II. Churchill faced enormous threats to Britain's survival and immense personal pressure. Yet, he famously maintained a demeanor of unshakable resolve and courage, rallying the British people with speeches that projected confidence even in dire circumstances. Churchill understood the power of projecting fearlessness not just for himself, but as a psychological weapon against enemies. His ability to control his emotional expression helped sustain national morale and deter potential adversaries. In contrast, leaders who have shown visible fear in critical moments often suffered devastating consequences. Take the example of King Louis XVI of France, whose indecisiveness and perceived weakness during the French Revolution contributed to his downfall and execution. His failure to project strength allowed revolutionary forces to view him as vulnerable and ineffective, hastening the collapse of the monarchy. In the modern corporate world, fear remains a significant liability when displayed by leaders. CEOs or managers who reveal fear during negotiations, company crises, or restructuring may lose the confidence of employees, investors, or partners. For instance, during the 2008 financial crisis, some corporate leaders who appeared anxious or panicked saw their company's stock prices tumble as markets reacted to perceived instability. Conversely, those who maintained composure and projected control were better positioned to navigate the turmoil and preserve stakeholder trust. On a personal level, fear manifests in countless everyday scenarios, from job interviews to social interactions, where revealing nervousness or uncertainty can undermine one's chances of success. Consider the nervous applicant who fidgets visibly during an interview. The hiring manager may unconsciously associate that visible fear with incompetence or lack of readiness, regardless of the candidate's actual skills. Similarly, in social situations, people who are seen as fearful or insecure may find it difficult to build authority or influence. Yet, it is important to differentiate between the complete suppression of fear and the strategic concealment that Machiavelli advocates. Total denial of fear is neither practical nor healthy. Fear serves as an internal signal to reassess risks and prepare for challenges. What Machiavelli suggests is not the absence of fear, but the mastery over its outward expression. The leader who feels fear internally, but does not broadcast it, maintains an aura of strength, preserving their ability to lead effectively. This distinction is supported by modern emotional intelligence theories, which emphasize awareness and regulation rather than repression. Emotional intelligence involves recognizing one's feelings, understanding their causes, and choosing how to express or act upon them in ways that serve one's goals. From this perspective, fear is a natural and valuable emotion, but it must be managed carefully to prevent it from undermining one's position or relationships. In practice, leaders develop various techniques to manage and mask fear. These include deliberate breathing exercises to control physiological symptoms, reframing challenges as opportunities to reduce anxiety, and focusing on actionable steps rather than catastrophic possibilities. Public speaking coaches, for example, teach clients to maintain steady eye contact and calm body language to project confidence, even when they feel nervous inside. Military commanders are trained to maintain calm under fire to keep their troops' morale intact. The ability to conceal fear also ties closely to cultural expectations and norms around leadership. Societies often expect leaders to embody courage and decisiveness, equating visible fear with failure or weakness. This cultural backdrop intensifies the stakes of emotional expression for those in power. Machiavelli's insights resonate precisely because they capture this harsh reality. That leadership is as much about perception as it is about substance. In summary, Machiavelli's warning about fear is rooted in a profound understanding of human psychology and the social dynamics of power. Fear is a natural, unavoidable emotion, but when revealed by those who seek to lead or command, it signals vulnerability that can rapidly erode authority and invite exploitation. Through historical examples, such as Julius Caesar's assassination, Winston Churchill's wartime leadership, and modern business crises, we see the real-world consequences of fear's visibility. Philosophical traditions like Stoicism and modern psychology reinforce the importance of mastering fear internally, while carefully managing its outward expression. Ultimately, the lesson is not to become devoid of feeling, but to cultivate the strength to control one's emotional signals strategically. In doing so, a leader maintains the crucial balance between humanity and authority, ensuring that fear does not become the undoing of their power or influence. Anger is one of the most intense and immediate human emotions, often described as a powerful force that can drive individuals to take action, defend themselves, or push back against perceived injustice. Yet, Niccolò Machiavelli, the keen observer of power and politics, warned sharply against the dangers of revealing anger openly. According to Machiavelli, showing anger, especially by those in leadership or influence, is a perilous move that can ultimately weaken one's position and open the door to manipulation and downfall. The negative consequences of unchecked and visible anger can be traced through history and psychology, revealing why it is so critical to control this emotion in the strategic game of power. At its core, Machiavelli's caution about anger stems from its unpredictability and its tendency to cloud rational judgment. While anger may provide immediate energy and motivation, it often blinds individuals to the long-term consequences of their actions. In a political or social context, a leader who erupts in anger risks alienating allies, provoking unnecessary conflicts, and undermining their own credibility. The unpredictable nature of anger can foster fear among followers, not respect, leading to instability within a group or organization. When those around a leader perceive them as quick-tempered or volatile, they may become reluctant to voice concerns or offer advice, fearing the consequences of provoking anger. This isolation can blind a leader to critical information and lead to poor decisions. Philosophically, anger has been a topic of extensive debate, with many thinkers recognizing both its potential usefulness and its dangers. Aristotle, for example, acknowledged that anger could be a justifiable response when it is proportionate and directed at the right target. However, he warned against excess, suggesting that uncontrolled anger is a vice rather than a virtue. The Stoics took an even stricter stance, advocating for the complete mastery over emotions, including anger, to maintain tranquility and clear-headedness. Seneca, a leading Stoic philosopher, wrote extensively about the destructive power of anger, describing it as a short madness that destroys reason and self-control. Modern psychology echoes many of these ancient insights. While anger can mobilize energy and focus, It also triggers physiological responses such as increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure, and the release of stress hormones. Prolonged or intense anger can impair cognitive function, reducing an individual's ability to think clearly and make sound decisions. Moreover, expressing anger aggressively can damage relationships, erode trust, and provoke retaliatory behaviors. Psychologists often emphasize emotional regulation skills techniques to recognize, manage, and channel anger constructively rather than letting it burst out uncontrollably. History provides numerous vivid examples of leaders whose uncontrolled anger led to catastrophic results. One of the most prominent cases is that of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon's extraordinary military genius was often overshadowed by his fiery temper. His quickness to anger alienated key generals and advisors, undermining critical alliances. On several occasions, his wrath led him to make rash decisions without fully considering strategic alternatives, contributing to military defeats and political isolation. For example, during the Russian campaign of 1812, Napoleon's frustration and anger with his marshal's hesitations contributed to harsh punishments and strained relationships, weakening the cohesion necessary for success. Ultimately, Napoleon's inability to fully manage his anger played a role in his downfall and exile. In a more contemporary setting, corporate executives who allow anger to dictate their behavior often see similar negative consequences. Stories of CEOs publicly losing their temper during earnings calls or meetings, shouting at employees, or reacting harshly to criticism abound in the business world. Such displays frequently erode employee morale, reduce productivity, and damage the company's public image. A notorious example is the case of John Sculley, former CEO of Apple, whose volatile temperament is said to have contributed to internal strife and the eventual departure of Steve Jobs in the mid-1980s. The damage caused by uncontrolled anger within an organization can be long-lasting and sometimes irreversible. Even in everyday life, the consequences of visible anger are familiar and relatable. Arguments fueled by anger often escalate quickly, leading to broken friendships, strained family relationships, and lost opportunities. People tend to remember not just what was said, but how it was said, the tone, the volume, the intensity. Anger expressed without control can overshadow reasoned discussion and make reconciliation difficult. It can also reinforce negative patterns, as anger provokes defensive or aggressive responses, creating cycles of conflict. Yet, anger itself is not inherently bad. It can serve as a crucial emotional signal, alerting individuals to violations of personal boundaries or injustice. The challenge lies in how anger is expressed and managed. Machiavelli's warning is not to deny anger, but to avoid revealing it in a way that undermines authority and strategic positioning. The leader who can harness anger internally, using it to fuel purposeful action without letting it burst forth uncontrollably, is far more effective. This subtle balance between acknowledging anger and controlling its expression finds support in the field of emotional intelligence, popularized by psychologist Daniel Goleman. Emotional intelligence involves recognizing one's emotional states, understanding their sources, and choosing appropriate ways to respond. Leaders with high emotional intelligence know when to mask their anger, when to express it constructively, and when to let it motivate action without letting it erode relationships or decision-making. The ancient world's examples also support this nuanced approach. Julius Caesar, for example, was known to possess a temper, but he generally displayed remarkable restraint in public settings, using his anger strategically rather than impulsively. His ability to project calm and control allowed him to navigate Rome's treacherous political waters effectively for many years. When Caesar did express anger, it was calculated and served to intimidate rivals without alienating supporters. In contrast, the downfall of leaders like Caligula in ancient Rome showcases the dangers of unrestrained anger. Caligula's notorious temper and erratic rage alienated both the Senate and the military, creating an atmosphere of fear and instability that led to his assassination. His inability to control his anger contributed directly to the collapse of his rule. The psychological consequences of expressing anger are also well documented in research on interpersonal relationships. Anger that is frequently displayed can lead to social rejection, loss of trust, and isolation. Studies show that people tend to avoid those who exhibit high levels of aggression or volatility, preferring more stable and emotionally regulated partners and colleagues. This natural social aversion highlights why leaders who expose their anger openly risk losing the loyalty and support necessary for effective leadership. In the business world, the concept of executive presence often includes the ability to remain composed under pressure, with anger viewed as a clear liability. Leaders who can maintain calm during crises inspire confidence and encourage teamwork, while those who erupt in anger sow discord and fear. The tech industry, with its fast-paced and high-pressure environment, offers many lessons on this. Leaders like Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, have been praised for their calm and empathetic leadership styles, demonstrating how emotional regulation can drive innovation and organizational success. On the other hand, the fall of companies like Uber during Travis Kalanick's tenure highlights the problems caused by a leader's uncontrolled temper. Kalanick's aggressive and often angry leadership style contributed to a toxic company culture, legal battles, and ultimately his forced resignation. This case underscores Machiavelli's point that anger, if not carefully managed, can undermine even the most ambitious and successful enterprises. In personal relationships, the consequences of revealing anger are equally profound. A study of couples shows that frequent expressions of uncontrolled anger predict relationship dissatisfaction and higher rates of divorce. In families, children exposed to parental anger without appropriate management often develop anxiety or behavioral problems. The cycle of anger can perpetuate itself across generations unless individuals learn to regulate and express it constructively. Yet, some traditions suggest that anger, when purified and disciplined, can be transformative. Buddhism, for instance, acknowledges anger as a natural human emotion but teaches mindful awareness and compassion as antidotes to its destructive tendencies. This philosophical approach aligns with the idea that anger should not be denied but understood and carefully moderated. In conclusion, anger is a powerful and necessary emotion. But Machiavelli's warning about its dangers, when openly revealed, remains strikingly relevant. Visible anger often signals unpredictability and weakness, which opponents and rivals can exploit. History and psychology alike demonstrate that leaders who cannot control their anger risk alienation, poor decision-making, and downfall. The mastery of anger, not its suppression, enables leaders to wield this emotion as a source of strength rather than destruction. Whether in ancient Rome, modern corporations, or everyday life, the ability to regulate anger carefully is essential to maintaining authority, respect, and effective leadership. Compassion is universally celebrated as a virtue, a hallmark of empathy and kindness that connects us to others on a deeply human level. We often view compassion as a strength, something that fosters community, heals wounds, and inspires generosity. Yet, Niccolò Machiavelli, the shrewd political thinker who dissected the mechanics of power, presented a counterintuitive warning. Excessive compassion, especially when openly displayed by leaders, can become a critical weakness. His insight challenges conventional wisdom, suggesting that while compassion is morally admirable, it can undermine authority, invite exploitation, and ultimately jeopardize one's ability to maintain power and order. Machiavelli's perspective emerges from his broader view of human nature and political necessity. In his famous work, The Prince, he argues that rulers must sometimes make harsh decisions to secure their position and the stability of the state. Compassion, when taken to extremes, may lead to leniency, indecision, or the failure to punish wrongdoing effectively. According to Machiavelli, A leader who is perceived as too compassionate risks losing respect and control because subjects, rivals, and enemies may interpret compassion as softness or weakness. In environments where power struggles are frequent and unforgiving, showing excessive mercy can encourage rebellion, disobedience, or betrayal. Philosophically, Machiavelli's warning about compassion aligns with a realistic, often cynical understanding of human behavior. He sees humans as self-interested and prone to taking advantage of any perceived vulnerability. Compassion, while noble, exposes those who express it to manipulation. If a leader is too willing to forgive or show mercy, opportunists may exploit this to challenge authority or gain advantage. Thus, Machiavelli advises that effective leadership balances compassion with firmness, ensuring that mercy does not become a liability. Eastern philosophies also offer nuanced views on compassion, often emphasizing its importance, but coupling it with wisdom and discernment. Buddhism, for instance, venerates compassion as a path to enlightenment and liberation from suffering. However, Buddhist teachings also stress the importance of right compassion, compassion informed by wisdom that does not foster attachment or enable harm. The ideal is to cultivate a compassionate heart that is balanced with clear insight into the realities of the world. Similarly, Confucianism highlights compassion as essential for social harmony, but insists that rulers must exercise it with justice and prudence. The wise leader in these traditions is compassionate, but also aware of when to enforce discipline to maintain order. Modern psychology confirms that compassion is a complex emotion that can have both positive and negative effects depending on how it is expressed and managed. Compassion fatigue is a well-documented phenomenon where individuals who continuously empathize with others' suffering experience emotional exhaustion, reducing their effectiveness and well-being. Moreover, excessive compassion without boundaries can lead to codependency, burnout, or exploitation in personal and professional contexts. Psychologists advocate for compassionate detachment, maintaining empathy while protecting oneself from emotional overwhelm or manipulation. History is replete with examples where leaders' excessive compassion or mercy led to their downfall or weakened their position. A striking example is that of King Louis XVI of France, whose compassionate nature and reluctance to enforce harsh measures contributed to the collapse of the French monarchy during the Revolution. His tendency to avoid decisive action in the face of growing unrest was seen as weakness by both revolutionaries and royalists, eroding his authority and hastening his execution. The French Revolution itself can be partly interpreted as a response to the failure of leadership that could balance compassion with firmness. Another illustrative case is Emperor Nero, notorious for his contradictory rule, which at times displayed elements of mercy, but ultimately suffered from perceptions of weakness and extravagance. Nero's leniency towards certain nobles and rivals, intended perhaps as gestures of goodwill or political strategy, were often interpreted as signs of vulnerability. These perceptions emboldened opponents and contributed to a loss of control that culminated in rebellion and his eventual suicide. In more recent times, business leaders who prioritize compassion without setting boundaries may face challenges in managing their organizations effectively. Leaders who fail to enforce rules, address poor performance, or confront difficult decisions in the name of compassion risk creating environments where standards decline and inefficiency grows. For example, in some companies, a culture overly focused on employee comfort and empathy without accountability has led to lowered productivity and increased conflicts. While compassion can enhance workplace morale, it must be balanced with clear expectations and consequences to sustain organizational health. On a personal level, excessive compassion can sometimes enable destructive behaviors or toxic relationships. People who are overly compassionate to the point of tolerating harmful actions from others, such as addiction, dishonesty, or abuse, may inadvertently perpetuate cycles of dysfunction. Psychologists note that setting healthy boundaries is essential to prevent compassion from becoming self-destructive. Compassion without limits can leave individuals vulnerable to manipulation and emotional drain. This paradox of compassion as both strength and potential weakness highlights the complexity of human emotions in leadership and social dynamics. Machiavelli's insight forces a re-examination of compassion's role not just as a moral ideal, but as a strategic factor. Effective leaders and individuals learn to embody compassion in ways that inspire trust and loyalty without compromising their authority or well-being. The balance between compassion and firmness is also reflected in leadership styles admired today. Leaders like Nelson Mandela exemplified this balance by showing empathy and forgiveness toward former adversaries while maintaining a strong vision for South Africa's future. Mandela's compassion was not weakness, but a deliberate choice grounded in strength and strategy. Conversely, leaders who failed to maintain this balance often face backlash. The example of Jimmy Carter, whose perceived excessive empathy in political dealings was sometimes criticized as naivety, demonstrates the fine line leaders must walk. Eastern thought offers additional lessons through the principle of skillful means, upaya, in Buddhism, which involves adapting one's actions to the context to alleviate suffering effectively. This principle suggests that compassion must be paired with wisdom and flexibility, sometimes requiring firmness or even harshness to achieve the greater good. In psychology, the practice of compassionate leadership encourages leaders to be empathetic while also setting clear boundaries and holding people accountable. This approach helps prevent the pitfalls Machiavelli warned about by ensuring compassion supports, rather than undermines, effective governance or management. Ultimately, the stories and philosophies converge on a central truth. Compassion, while essential for human connection and ethical leadership, must be exercised with prudence. Leaders who reveal unguarded compassion risk being seen as weak or indecisive, inviting exploitation and loss of control. Those who master the art of balancing compassion with strength preserve their authority and foster genuine respect. The ability to navigate this delicate emotional terrain remains relevant not only in politics or business, but in everyday life. Whether managing family relationships, friendships, or community roles, understanding when and how to show compassion can influence outcomes profoundly. Compassion combined with discernment protects both the giver and the receiver, creating healthier interactions and more sustainable relationships. Machiavelli's warning about compassion challenges us to rethink this emotion beyond its conventional moral framing. It invites a more strategic and nuanced approach to empathy, one that acknowledges human frailty but insists on the necessity of boundaries and strength. Compassion, in this light, becomes not just an act of kindness, but a measured, powerful tool, one that, when wielded wisely, strengthens rather than diminishes leadership and influence. In today's fast-paced world, the way people express their emotions has become more complex and often problematic, especially when it comes to managing fear, anger, and compassion, the very emotions Machiavelli warned about revealing openly. Despite centuries of wisdom on emotional mastery, most people still frequently make mistakes in how they display their feelings. This widespread struggle can be attributed to a range of factors, many of which are amplified by the conditions of modern society, particularly the pervasive influence of social media, shifting cultural norms, and a general lack of awareness or strategy regarding emotional regulation. One of the biggest contributors to the mishandling of emotions today is the dramatic shift in how people communicate and perceive one another's feelings, largely fueled by social media platforms. In the past, emotional expression was often confined to face-to-face interactions or small communities, where context, tone, and subtlety could be more easily managed. Now, with platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, people broadcast their emotional states to vast, often anonymous audiences instantly and continuously. The digital world encourages immediate reactions and unfiltered sharing, sometimes rewarding raw emotionality, regardless of its appropriateness or consequences. This environment creates a feedback loop where emotional outbursts, such as displays of anger or fear, quickly gain attention and validation, reinforcing impulsive expression rather than thoughtful restraint. Viral posts often thrive on controversy and drama, leading individuals to overshare or exaggerate feelings to gain social capital. As a result, many people find themselves trapped in cycles of emotional exposure that erode their personal and professional relationships or reputations. The social media culture also blurs the line between private and public emotions, causing confusion about when and where certain feelings are appropriate to share. A moment of frustration vented in a tweet can be seen worldwide, leading to misunderstandings, backlash, or even professional consequences. Moreover, the lack of nonverbal cues online makes it harder for others to interpret emotional nuances correctly, often amplifying miscommunication and conflict. This phenomenon contributes to a world where people frequently reveal fear, anger, or compassion without the strategic consideration Machiavelli advocated, often to their detriment. Beyond the impact of social media, modern society itself has evolved in ways that make emotional regulation more challenging. The increasing emphasis on authenticity and emotional openness, while valuable in fostering connection, can paradoxically encourage the uninhibited display of emotions without appropriate filters. Cultural narratives promoting being true to yourself sometimes clash with the practical need for discretion in social or professional contexts. People are encouraged to express their feelings as a form of self-care or empowerment, yet without guidance on how or when to temper those feelings, this can lead to unintended vulnerabilities. This cultural shift is compounded by the growing recognition and discussion of mental health, which has destigmatized emotions, but also, in some cases, led to the normalization of emotional impulsiveness. While greater emotional awareness is undoubtedly positive, it can also foster confusion when individuals lack the skills or strategies to regulate their responses effectively. The difference between acknowledging emotions and expressing them tactically is often overlooked, resulting in many inadvertently broadcasting emotions that should be guarded. A critical part of this problem lies in the widespread lack of emotional literacy and strategic emotional intelligence. Most people do not receive formal education or training on how to understand, interpret, and manage their emotions in complex social environments. Unlike cognitive skills like math or language, emotional regulation is often left to trial and error or informal learning through experience, which can be inconsistent and fraught with mistakes. Many individuals struggle to recognize the triggers and consequences of their emotional expressions. They might not realize that showing fear during a negotiation can weaken their position, or that venting anger publicly can damage long-term relationships. Without a clear strategy for when and how to reveal emotions, people default to reactive behaviors, often controlled by the intensity of the moment rather than careful reflection. This lack of strategy also means that people often confuse emotional honesty with emotional impulsiveness. They may believe that being genuine means expressing every feeling as it arises, without considering the impact on themselves or others. This misconception ignores the crucial role of emotional management as a form of communication, one that involves choosing what to reveal, when, and how to maximize understanding and influence. In practical, everyday life, these challenges play out in a variety of familiar scenarios. In the workplace, for instance, an employee who openly displays frustration or anger during meetings may inadvertently alienate colleagues or damage their professional reputation. Despite good intentions, the emotional outburst becomes a liability rather than a constructive expression. Conversely, an individual who masks all emotions out of fear of judgment might seem disengaged or unapproachable, limiting opportunities for collaboration and leadership. On social media, countless examples show how quickly emotional posts can spiral out of control. A viral video of someone expressing fear during a crisis might garner sympathy, but can also expose the person to ridicule or criticism, depending on the audience's interpretation. Similarly, public figures often face backlash for appearing too compassionate or too harsh, demonstrating the tightrope walk required in managing emotions in the public eye. In personal relationships, emotional missteps are equally common and impactful. People frequently reveal anger impulsively during arguments, which escalates conflicts and damages bonds. At the same time, excessive displays of compassion without boundaries can lead to codependency or burnout as individuals sacrifice their own needs to support others. Fear, when unacknowledged or poorly managed, can manifest as withdrawal or anxiety, confusing partners or friends and eroding intimacy. Education systems and workplaces are beginning to recognize these challenges by incorporating emotional intelligence training, mindfulness practices, and conflict resolution skills. However, these programs are still not universally accessible or emphasized, leaving many individuals without the tools needed to navigate their emotional worlds effectively. Another complicating factor is the increasing pace and complexity of modern life. The constant bombardment of information, multitasking, and high expectations create stress that can exacerbate emotional volatility. People are more prone to emotional exhaustion, making it harder to regulate feelings intentionally. In this context, the temptation to react impulsively or seek immediate relief through emotional expression is strong. Additionally, many people lack role models or mentors who exemplify effective emotional management. While stories of Machiavelli or Stoic philosophers provide intellectual guidance, their principles may feel abstract or outdated without practical translation into contemporary experiences. Without clear examples of how to apply emotional control strategically, individuals rely on observation and imitation, which can lead to inconsistent or ineffective behaviors. Ultimately, the frequent mistakes people make in revealing fear, anger, or compassion stem from a combination of cultural, technological, psychological, and educational factors. The modern world's emphasis on authenticity and instant communication, amplified by social media, often encourages unfiltered emotional expression. At the same time, there is a widespread lack of awareness about the strategic importance of controlling emotional displays in social and professional contexts. This gap leaves many vulnerable to the very pitfalls Machiavelli described centuries ago: loss of influence, damaged relationships, and missed opportunities. To navigate these challenges, individuals must develop greater emotional awareness and strategic thinking. This involves learning to recognize the power of emotions as signals, understanding their potential impact on others, and cultivating the discipline to manage when and how emotions are expressed. Emotional intelligence is not about suppressing feelings, but about mastering their communication to serve one's goals and preserve relationships. In everyday life, this might mean pausing before responding in anger, reframing fear as cautious preparation rather than panic, or offering compassion with boundaries that protect personal well-being. It also means being mindful of the medium through which emotions are shared, recognizing that a text, tweet, or video can lack the nuance of face-to-face interaction and may require extra care in tone and content. As society continues to evolve, balancing emotional authenticity with strategic restraint will remain a critical skill. Learning from thinkers like Machiavelli, alongside insights from psychology and philosophy, can help individuals navigate the emotional complexities of modern life. By doing so, people can avoid common pitfalls, strengthen their relationships, and wield emotional power with wisdom and effectiveness. Controlling and applying emotions strategically is a skill that Machiavelli emphasized as essential for maintaining power and influence. His advice goes beyond mere suppression of feelings. Instead, it centers on the deliberate management of emotional expression to serve practical ends. This approach to emotions finds echoes in various philosophical traditions, psychological insights, and real-world leadership practices. Understanding how to identify, monitor, and adjust emotions, particularly fear, anger, and compassion, can transform not only political or professional success, but also everyday interpersonal dynamics. Machiavelli's perspective on emotional control is grounded in pragmatism. He recognized that emotions are natural and unavoidable, but what matters most is how leaders manage their outward displays. According to him, the appearance of strength, confidence, and resolve can often be more powerful than the reality behind it. This masking of true feelings serves to project authority and deter adversaries. For example, even when a leader feels fear internally, showing calmness and decisiveness signals to others that they are in control. Machiavelli's famous dictum that it is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both, underscores the strategic value of projecting emotions that consolidate power rather than reveal vulnerability. Similar ideas appear throughout history in different philosophical schools. The Stoics, such as Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, taught the importance of mastering one's passions through reason. They argued that external events are often beyond control, but one can govern internal reactions. This means cultivating an inner state where emotions are acknowledged but do not dictate behavior impulsively. Stoicism advocates for a clear-eyed acceptance of reality combined with disciplined emotional regulation, allowing individuals to act rationally and effectively even under stress. This aligns closely with Machiavelli's advice, though Stoicism places greater emphasis on virtue and inner tranquility. In Eastern philosophy, practices like mindfulness and meditation aim to develop self-awareness and detachment from immediate emotional reactions. Buddhism, for instance, encourages practitioners to observe their feelings without attachment or judgment, creating space to respond rather than react. This level of emotional awareness supports the strategic control Machiavelli recommended, helping individuals recognize the arising of fear, anger, or compassion before these emotions overwhelm them. Modern psychology offers practical frameworks for emotional control through concepts like emotional intelligence, EI. Daniel Goleman's model of EI highlights skills such as self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. Self-awareness involves recognizing one's emotions as they occur, understanding their triggers, and observing their effects. Self-regulation then involves managing those emotions, choosing when and how to express them constructively. These skills directly support Machiavelli's approach by providing tools to avoid impulsive emotional displays that can be harmful. Practically applying these ideas requires a process. First, identifying emotions accurately. Second, monitoring their intensity and influence. And third, adjusting responses deliberately. For instance, a leader may feel anger rising during a heated discussion. The first step is to recognize this feeling as it emerges without denial or suppression. The second is to assess how this anger might affect judgment or communication. The third is to channel that energy into focused, purposeful statements rather than explosive outbursts, or to delay response until calmer reflection is possible. This approach to emotional control is not about becoming robotic or insincere, but about developing emotional agility, the capacity to adapt one's emotional expression to suit the context and goals. It involves a keen understanding of both oneself and others. For example, showing measured compassion can build trust and loyalty, while excessive displays might signal weakness. Similarly, a controlled display of anger can demonstrate passion and resolve, but uncontrolled rage destroys credibility. Real-life stories illustrate both successes and failures in managing emotion strategically. Consider Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War. Known for his calm demeanor and thoughtful speeches, Lincoln faced enormous pressures that could have easily overwhelmed him with fear or anger. Instead, he practiced deliberate emotional control, which helped him navigate political divisions and maintain public confidence. His ability to restrain visible anger and fear and to show measured compassion contributed significantly to his leadership legacy. On the other hand, history provides cautionary tales like that of Richard Nixon. His public image was often marred by visible anxiety and anger, especially during crises such as the Watergate scandal. Nixon's inability to mask these emotions effectively eroded trust and opened the door to political downfall. His example demonstrates how failure to manage emotional expression can accelerate loss of power and reputation. In the corporate world, leaders like Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, are praised for their emotional intelligence and balanced approach to emotions. Nadella's leadership style emphasizes empathy, openness, and calm decisiveness, which have revitalized Microsoft's culture and market position. His ability to regulate his own emotions while understanding others' needs exemplifies the practical application of Machiavelli's principles adapted to modern contexts. Conversely, leaders who fail to manage emotions can damage organizational morale and effectiveness. A well-known example is Travis Kalanick, former CEO of Uber, whose aggressive and often angry public behavior contributed to a toxic workplace culture and legal challenges, ultimately forcing his resignation. This case underlines how unmanaged emotions can undermine even highly successful enterprises. Beyond leadership, these principles apply to everyday interpersonal relationships. People who practice emotional awareness and regulation tend to communicate more effectively, resolve conflict constructively, and build stronger connections. Techniques such as mindful breathing, pausing before responding, and reflecting on one's emotional triggers help in this process. For example, in heated conversations, taking a moment to acknowledge rising anger internally, but choosing a calm tone can prevent escalation and foster understanding. Training and education are increasingly recognizing the value of emotional regulation skills. Programs in schools and workplaces focus on developing emotional intelligence through role-playing, feedback, and reflective practices. These efforts aim to equip individuals with the ability to manage emotions strategically, echoing the centuries-old wisdom Machiavelli highlighted. In sum, controlling and applying emotions like fear, anger, and compassion requires deliberate practice and awareness. Machiavelli's advice, supported by philosophical traditions and modern psychology, encourages individuals to master their emotional expressions to maintain authority and effectiveness. By identifying emotions early, monitoring their influence, and adjusting responses to fit the context, people can navigate social dynamics skillfully. Success stories from history and modern leadership demonstrate the power of this approach, while failures underscore the risks of emotional impulsiveness. Ultimately, emotional mastery is not about denying humanity, but about harnessing it thoughtfully to achieve desired outcomes and sustain meaningful relationships. The three emotions Machiavelli warned about, fear, anger, and compassion, are deeply ingrained aspects of human nature. Yet they carry profound risks when expressed openly, especially by those seeking influence or leadership. Fear, when revealed, signals vulnerability and can quickly erode confidence, inviting challenges from rivals or diminishing the trust of followers. Anger, while a natural and sometimes justified response, is volatile and often clouds judgment, alienating allies and provoking unnecessary conflicts. Compassion, typically seen as a virtue, can paradoxically become a liability if it is perceived as weakness or indecisiveness, enabling exploitation and undermining authority. Together, these emotions, when uncontrolled or improperly expressed, have the potential to dismantle power structures and destabilize relationships. Machiavelli's insight into the dangers of these emotions remains strikingly relevant today, transcending the political intrigue of Renaissance Italy to resonate in modern contexts, from corporate boardrooms and international diplomacy to everyday social interactions. His pragmatic approach challenges us to reconsider common cultural narratives that celebrate emotional transparency without strategic discernment. While authenticity is valued, Machiavelli reminds us that emotional expression is a form of communication that must be wielded with intention and awareness of its consequences. The lessons drawn from Machiavelli's observations encourage a disciplined mastery over emotional expression. This mastery does not mean suppressing emotions or becoming detached from our humanity. Instead, it calls for a nuanced understanding of when and how to reveal feelings in a way that preserves dignity, maintains authority, and fosters productive relationships. In an era dominated by social media and rapid communication, where emotions are often broadcast impulsively and amplified, the capacity to regulate fear, anger, and compassion strategically is more crucial than ever. Modern psychology and philosophy support this view, emphasizing emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions and those of others as a key determinant of personal and professional success. Emotional regulation allows individuals to navigate conflicts, inspire trust, and make reasoned decisions under pressure. It empowers leaders to project confidence without arrogance, respond firmly without cruelty, and show empathy without compromising their position. Real-world examples abound demonstrating the power of this emotional discipline. Figures like Abraham Lincoln and Nelson Mandela illustrate how controlled fear and measured compassion can inspire nations and drive transformative change. Meanwhile, the failures of leaders such as Napoleon and Nixon reveal how unrestrained anger and visible fear can precipitate downfall. In business, leaders who cultivate emotional intelligence, like Satya Nadella, have revitalized organizations, while those who lack it risk fostering toxic cultures and eroding trust. For individuals, the practical takeaway is clear. Mastering one's emotional expression is not merely about gaining power over others, but also about achieving inner stability and authentic connections. It involves cultivating self-awareness, pausing before reacting, and choosing responses aligned with long-term goals rather than fleeting impulses. This skill enhances not only influence and respect, but also personal happiness and fulfillment, as unregulated emotions often lead to conflict, regret, and isolation. The call to action is therefore to actively practice emotional regulation as a lifelong discipline. This begins with self-reflection, recognizing patterns of fear, anger, and compassion in one's own behavior, and extends to developing strategies such as mindfulness, cognitive reframing, and communication skills. It also involves understanding the context and audience, adapting emotional expressions to suit different social or professional environments. By integrating Machiavelli's pragmatic wisdom with contemporary insights into emotional intelligence, individuals can transform how they relate to themselves and others. Controlling these powerful emotions thoughtfully is a path to sustainable influence, healthier relationships, and a deeper sense of personal empowerment. In a world that often encourages raw emotional expression without boundaries, embracing this balanced approach offers a distinct advantage, one that aligns with both the pursuit of power and the quest for genuine happiness. So now you know the three emotions that Niccolò Machiavelli warned leaders never to reveal: fear, anger, and compassion. We've seen why showing these feelings openly can be like handing your power away on a silver platter. But more importantly, we've explored how controlling these emotions, learning when and how to reveal them, can make the difference between success and failure, influence and irrelevance, happiness and frustration. Think about the people around you. How many of them accidentally broadcast fear when they're anxious? How often do you see anger explode and create rifts that could have been avoided? And how many times has misplaced compassion allowed someone to take advantage or weakened a position of strength? This isn't just historical theory. It's a practical, actionable insight for your everyday life. Whether you're negotiating a raise, leading a team, building relationships, or even managing your social media presence, understanding these emotional dynamics can give you an edge few others have. But mastering this is a journey. It requires self-awareness, practice, and sometimes tough choices. You won't become a master overnight, but with every step you take to control and strategically express your emotions, you gain more power over your life and your happiness. If this video gave you new insights or challenged your way of thinking, please hit that like button to let me know and share it with anyone you think needs to hear this. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, where we explore the hidden patterns behind success, power, and human behavior. And if you want to take your support further, check out the donate or super thanks buttons on YouTube. Every bit helps me research and create better videos for you. Plus, if you leave a comment telling me how you plan to apply these lessons, I'll personally read and respond to as many as I can. Remember, power isn't about manipulation or cruelty, it's about emotional mastery, self-awareness, and strategic communication. The moment you start practicing this, you're already ahead of most people. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next video.